Hi, everyone. I am just going to wait a few more minutes to make sure everyone is in here. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. All right, I am going to get started. Welcome everyone to the July Community Table Conversation. If you have not attended one of these previously, we do conduct these every third Thursday from 3 to 4. You can register for our upcoming one on our website. So for today's conversation, for today, I am going to give us a little bit of an update on where we are in the state digital equity planning process. And then we're going to quickly move into our discussion. And for today, I really want us to focus on what is happening after that plan is implemented. So while I'm going through these introduction slides, please continue. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. It's amazing to see everyone that is attending. So just a little bit of housekeeping. My advice is to save all general questions until the very end. I would really hate if one of your questions got lost in the discussion or lost in the chat at all. Once we get to the discussion portion, please feel free to use the chat box, or if you would like to speak, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. This way, it's less of me just talking at you and we can collaborate together. Here is the broadband office. So the state broadband director, Sandy Bomick. My name is Lillian Lee. I am the broadband grants and compliance manager. Cindy Hogan is our digital equity program manager, and Crystal Severus is our broadband data GIS analyst. And we are definitely not doing this all on our own. We have amazing partners. The Digital Equity Institute, or DEI, they are helping us with our state digital equity plan. For the BEAD program, KPMG and Connected Nation are helping us. And then we have Karen Ziegler that is helping our office as well. And then our NTIA Federal Program Officer for the state of Arizona is Nicole Umayam, and she is on this call as well if you have any questions that you can direct to her. Okay, so our timeline, where we are in the planning process. I want to say this is a very general macro level timeline. We are currently in this stage right here. So this summer, DEI has really been taking the charge on getting this plan together. They are doing a lot of data collection via surveys and interviews. They have this statewide listening session tour, which has been amazing, and just doing general outreach and engagement. As you can see in this timeline, come October, mid-October, we are going to be posting our state digital equity plan draft. And once that happens, our public comment period opens, and that is where we are soliciting and responding to public comments regarding the draft. That is going to be open for about a month. Once it closes, we are going to finalize the plan utilizing the public comments, and then we are going to submit the plan to NTIA. So that is just a general overview of where we are in the timeline. Before we begin our discussion, I want to take us back to what we discussed last month. If you were here last month, if not, that is okay. I'm going to bring it back up here. We are currently in this program, in this portion of the Digital Equity Act, which is the planning portion. As I keep saying, we are creating the state digital equity plan. For the purposes of today, I want us to focus on that second program, the one right below it, the state capacity grant. So this is a lot of words. Essentially, the purpose of this program is to implement the state digital equity plan. And I specifically want to focus on this right here. I'm going to give you guys a second just to read this. So one of the allowable uses of funds of this program is to award a grant to an entity, essentially to implement aspects of the plan. So what are some eligible entities? One can be a state agency that administers or supervises adult education and literacy activities, or for providing public housing, an Indian tribe, a not-for-profit entity, a community anchor institute, a local educational agency, an entity that carries out workforce development program, or a partnership between all of these groups. So thinking about the purpose of the capacity grant program, thinking about subgranting to entities such as these, here are my questions. So how should Arizona determine which entities to subgrant funding to, and what factors should Arizona consider in this decision? I'm going to give everyone a little bit of thinking time. Feel free to jot ideas in the chat, or if you would like, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Erin, you can go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Erin Larandos. I'm the Digital Inclusion Library Consultant for the Arizona State Library. I just want to jump in and say that libraries across our state are doing a lot of this work through digital literacy programming, and as well as offering tech help and troubleshooting and connection for folks in their communities to the internet, and have been for a very long time. So I would posit that libraries do a lot of this work, and that they should definitely be considered either at the state library level so that subgrants could happen, or directly to our districts that are doing the work.
Great, thank you, Erin. I appreciate your input. I do see some comments in the chat. Let's see. Someone said, where are the greatest needs? That would be the best place to start. Frank said, I've seen community anchor model. Bob asked, this said an entity. Does that mean that there's only one grant slot available? No, that is not what it means. There could be multiple grants. Oh, Karina asked a great question. She said, why is it only adult education? Is this digital equity not considering K-12 education? No, we're definitely considering K-12 education as well. Local educational agencies or school districts can have programs funded through this program as well.
Hello.
There.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Sundust. I am the Executive Director of Digital Connect. We are based out of the Gila River Indian community, and we're fully a digital inclusion program. And I think that I just want to submit that entities that are community-based should receive some sort of prioritization in the determination process, meaning community entities that are sponsored by a local government or in some way embedded in the community. I think that those should be given some sort of priority to provide services, as opposed to maybe a larger organization sort of swooping in.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight. And you're not the only person to say that. I've seen the word community thrown out a few times in this chat. Thank you. Philip says quality of life impact should be considered a factor. And he gave a few examples there.
Hi, this is Mariana Milton. I'm the impact manager for Arizona Students Recycling Use Technology. And I just want to echo libraries and community organizations, I think, understand the local populations and the environment that is so important. Already having those trusted relationships is really very important in this kind of work when we're trying to reach groups of people who have maybe not been included in a lot of planning related to digital inclusion. And then also I'd just like to add, since I come from a refurbishing organization and we're highly involved in the equipment needed for digital inclusion, that we look at organizations that have a history in Arizona doing this kind of work and try to look at those models and build from them in a very sustainable way. I think sometimes when there's new grant money arriving, there's a flurry of activity in new organizations, and we may or may not be able to continue those organizations. So I think looking at organizations that have a history of making impact in this area is really important, and that we keep a balance and realize that digital inclusion is is multifaceted. So that's why, again, just circling back, I think the local community approaches are really, really important.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we're hearing similar thoughts around using the words local and community. Let me see. I'm going to pop back into the chat. Let's see. Philip says digital equity and inclusion is not limited to access of digital resources. It also includes the education to function in a digital environment. So I also want us to be thinking about even what's happening after that. You know, we have these sub-grants, we have these programs running, the plans being implemented. How do we go about evaluating the effectiveness of these programs? How do we go about evaluating the effectiveness of concepts such as digital equity and digital literacy and digital inclusion? And then how can we ensure these programs are sustainable and impactful in the long term? While we are thinking and responding, I'm going to throw up another question there, and it kind of ties into what Mariana said earlier. How can we ensure covered populations are decision makers within the implementation process? Yes, they are heavily involved in this planning process, but how do we make sure that continues once we are implementing the plan?
I'll be quick this time, but for the last question, hire members in the covered populations, pay them to share their expertise and their life experience.
Thank you for that. Philip asks in the chat for number 1, is there a possibility to marry the impact of economic development, job growth, high school persistence? And then, or I'm just going to let that one marinate a little bit with the crowd. I see Chris is answering number 3. He said, standard process for those receiving intended benefits to provide feedback easily at point of service. Isaac asked for number 1, how should the 911 and first responder needs be factored? For number 2, I see Philip says metric and feedback loops, measurable results that have a funding dependency may be an option. While we are just waiting for our last few comments, I do want to say these questions are absolutely vital. If you later on in bed at 3 in the morning, because of course you're thinking about this webinar, you think, oh, I have a great answer to one of these questions, feel free to email us or contact us with your feedback. So again, I'm providing some context from last month's webinar. If you were not here, we did discuss the BEAD program, gave a quick overview, and essentially the objective of the BEAD program is universal broadband access. We touched on the some allowable uses of funds, which are on the screen as well. And I also do want to point out that Arizona's BEAD program will be implemented as a subgrant program as well, where we will be subgranting to entities including ISPs, nonprofits, communities, cooperatives, tribal entities, and others. So my question for the group is, how can Arizona apply a digital equity lens to the BEAD program and to infrastructure projects? I see, let's see. Oh, we have lots of comments. That's fantastic. Mariana said, don't create infrastructure in a vacuum, require partnership for ISPs. Frank says, I think one obvious way is to ensure the community is at the table in the discussions. Let's see.
Hello, Mikhail Sundust again. Sorry, I might have missed something because my internet dropped briefly. But in terms of applying a digital equity lens to the BEAD program, one thing that I try to emphasize to everybody I speak to about this is that any sort of infrastructure project is a form of digital equity because it's the access to broadband component of digital equity, right? So, I mean, I'm just sort of basing this off of my understanding of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance's definition of digital equity, which has three components. That's access to broadband, equipment, and knowledge or training. And the first component of that, the broadband access, is like the first step towards digital equity. So I think having that understanding, I like the suggestion to include the community at the table for these projects, maybe making those public comment periods more accessible to the public. And also asking whenever there is an infrastructure only project, asking the question, you know, what digital inclusion programs will be associated with the community that this infrastructure project will serve. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Just jumping back into some of the comments, I see Matt said, identify underserved and unserved areas for resource allocation. Susan says, successful grant recipients should have a demonstrated commitment to digital equity. It is not enough just to build networks to unserved areas or communities, excuse me. Okay, I do want to mention our partners and our team working on the BEAD program really do have digital equity in mind. As we know, these programs need to be aligned. One cannot be successful without the other. So these ideas and thoughts and insight are very much appreciated from both ends. So one key requirement of the state digital equity plan is to create measurable objectives for documenting and promoting those 5 criteria right there. Alongside that, we must have an assessment for how those objectives we created impact and interact with Arizona's goals in the areas listed. So economic and workforce development, educational outcomes. So as we think about those measurable objectives, it's absolutely vital that we consider how they will look for each one of these areas. And so I want us to start by discussing education. And I forgot who it was that asked about K-12 education. I come from a K-12 background, so I will not forget K-12 education in any of this. So my first question for us is, how can Arizona ensure we are providing all K-12 students the digital skills for the 21st century workforce they will be entering? And I will throw up the second question as well while we are all thinking and responding. How can schools and educators support students with engaging and creating with technology, the internet, and digital resources rather than simply just consuming those tools and resources? Let's see, I see add digital literacy and info literacy skills into standardized tests so they can be developed and tracked. Isaac asked, why do you assume education and learning stops at K-12? It definitely does not. We can definitely have programs in higher education institutes as well. Should Department of Education have a curriculum policy to require ethics and privacy in tech courses? That is a fantastic question. By allowing free computer classes, digital literacy, media literacy curriculum in K-12 schools. And if we want to expand this to higher education as well, please feel free to include those comments. Or number 2, incorporate project-based learning. The ability to problem solve and use critical thinking are high on employer minds. I love how involved everyone is in the chat. I apologize if I don't get a chance to see yours right at this moment and say it out loud to the group. I want everyone to know that we do collect the history of this chat log, so nobody's comment or question will get missed throughout this process. I see from Aaron, OEO's ARC/digital literacy module is a viable option to test starting points and track progress. Thank you for that. Implementing a navigator program for each city so that people can get assistance when they need it. As we move on from education, I think, who was it? I think it might have been Frank who discussed workforce and employers in there as well. We are going to be moving on to workforce development, but like we kind of discussed earlier, all of these ideas can be married together. They're all connected in some way. So workforce development. I am just focusing on telework right now. Of course, there's so many components to workforce development and digital equity, but for today's purposes, we are going to focus on telework. So with an increase in telework, what impact does this have on Arizona's workforce and Arizona's economy? And then my follow-up question to that is, how can Arizona make telework a more equitable option? Let's see. Oh, these are coming in real fast, which I love. I see create community tech centers in rural areas beyond basic access, the need for a resilient and redundant digital infrastructure, especially in rural areas. Oh, reimbursements for teleworkers. Philip says, while telework is a great positive impact, it may not be realistic for every job and career out there. I see a question posed. Oh, I just lost it. There it is. Is it possible to have people with disabilities have access to telework? I think that's a great question for the group. Telework affords better pay opportunity while living in different environments. Teleworking is a great way to attract workers that are unhappy with their state for whatever reason. Interesting. The commercial real estate industry in AZ is being hurt pretty badly with more remote jobs. There needs to be opportunities to turn some of those vacant offices into tech hubs for training. It has a huge impact because it becomes a barrier to employment or to continue employment. Someone said teach companies how to incorporate telework. Okay, while the last few folks get your ideas in, I am going to move on to health outcomes. So just like workforce, telework, telehealth is huge right now. My question for us is, how can Arizona create equity in health outcomes? And my follow-up is there a risk to encouraging Arizonans to share their health information online? Frank says maybe not so much a risk, but a lack of trust in communities of color. So just as these are popping in, it looks like a lot of people are answering yes to number 2. Is there a risk? For anyone with super long messages, feel free to raise your hand. You can always voice those as well rather than typing. I see one comment. It says telehealth access points in public libraries provide that same security in a trusted environment. I see one comment. It says telehealth isn't very accurate in taking care of most health needs. Doctors need to see their patients as well. Effective telehealth is critical to creating health equity in rural areas where access to doctors and specialists is limited. I've seen ACP mentioned multiple times throughout this discussion. I think this health conversation is a really interesting one, clearly, with how active the chat is. There's a lot of factors to consider, like security. Frank mentioned trust with relaying information like that online. Will these slides be available online? We do post the recording online. At this time, we do not post the slides. I can definitely send them to you individually. I have no problem with that. But yes, this recording will be online. I see there have been successful telehealth pilots in Pima County libraries. Okay, so while we get those last minute comments in, I want to say I kept today's conversation pretty general and broad, so that we can be set up for our upcoming conversations, our monthly conversations. And it seems like these topics of our workforce development goals and our health outcome and our education outcome are hot topics that we wanted to discuss, and how our digital equity plan will interact in those areas. Knowing that, we can definitely proceed and continue these conversations and get a little bit more in depth as we go on. So your input is so important in this process. You guys are amazing stakeholders, and we want you guys to stay connected with us and the digital equity plan. So in case you don't know, we do have digital equity surveys up, one for community anchor institutes and one for community members. If you have not taken it, feel free to take it. Feel free to pass those links along as well. They are available in different languages, and we do have paper copies. So if you are somebody that knows you want a stack of paper copies, contact me or someone from our team, and we can help you out with that. Like I mentioned previously, we have the listening session tour happening all throughout Arizona. If somebody from my team has the upcoming dates, feel free to drop those in the chat. Of course, these monthly table conversations, and I want to keep them as interactive as possible, where we are getting your feedback. So please feel register for the next one in August. And then the contact us form that is on our website. Again, if somebody from my team can drop the link to that, that would be wonderful. And the email that is connected to that form is actually up on the screen. It is broadband@azcommerce.com if you want to contact our office with general questions. And I have listed the emails for each member of our team to if you need to contact us. Nicole, I know you're on the call. If you could drop your email in the chat as well. I wanted to save the little bit of time at the end of this for just general questions or comments. I know we had, I threw a lot of questions at you and we moved through them very quickly. But at this time, if you have a question or comment, feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you, or you can keep using the chat. There is Nicole's email in the chat. As a reminder, she is our federal program officer. Thank you, Karen. She also dropped, Karen dropped the dates for the upcoming listening sessions we have that are being facilitated by the Digital Equity Institute. Well, we can, you can jump off early if you would like. I will stay behind for a little bit longer in case you have a specific question. Again, if you need to jump off, but you want to hear these questions, this recording will be uploaded on our website. And if you are jumping off, I appreciate you attending this roundtable with us. Thank you to everyone that is still here with me. I am going to end this webinar now in case, oh, you have a question? Oh, thank you. That's a great question. Will this be our format moving forward? You know, I cannot give you a straight answer for that right now. It may or may not be. So just be on the lookout for any communications we have if we end up changing that format. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.